Dan Perkins Media presents a unique and exciting program. Truth Starts Now, a conversation with Dan Perkins. The left has taken away your rights to freedom of speech. Truth Starts Now is a platform for you to regain your voice. America and Americans will be better off if we can have civil and respectful conversations about the day's important issues. Now, here's your host, Dan Perkins.
Welcome to the Cambridge Connection, and joining us today is Gordon Oliver, our longtime co-host. And today we decided we'd talk about something that's really hot in the marketplace, and is it a good time to buy, or should you consider renting? And what are the prospects longer term, buying versus renting? So are you ready to go, sir?
I'm ready to rock, Dan. Thank you for having me as always.
Let's go. What are your thoughts?
Where does all of this start? And I want to make sure that, we frame this properly. Number one, it's a choice, right? So there are opinions about whether you should rent or own, and those come from, places of family members or friends that have an opinion where, oh, it's silly to pay someone else for for your where you live when you could have it as an investment. Well, all of that sounds wonderful, but as everything, there's pros and cons to both. And where I would start, just from the experience of counseling people over time, and we see these mistakes all the time. And if you look at some of the bankruptcy statistics of when people actually file, the amount of money that they're spending on housing is way above what's recommended. And here's the other big thing that I've never understood, and I don't know whether you agree or don't agree, but the fact that things are calculated on what you're eligible for as far as lending is based on gross income is just silly, because gross income doesn't mean anything to a consumer. It's the net income that is the real number of what you get when you get your paycheck minus deductions, taxes, healthcare, whatever that's going to be. So the first place to start is whether it's renting or owning, there's a percentage that's recommended of your income that you should be spending on housing. That number is 28% of your gross income. Now, for your viewers, what does that mean? If you make $10,000 a month, that means 2,800 should be the max amount of gross that you spend for a housing payment on a monthly basis. Now, get back to what I said on the net side. What is 2,800 gross? It's probably more like 2,400, because once the deductions are taken out, what's the net income total off that 10,000? It's really should be 28% of the net because of affordability. I'm not talking about getting approved by a lender. I'm talking about what your budget should, on the average, sustain.
Well, one of the things that's um, been talked about for decades, if not centuries, is buy real estate because there's only so much of it available. And when it's all been sold, there ain't any more.
Yep.
Now, I'll use my last home in Sanibel as an example. That home we bought 5 years ago. And at that time, we were not experiencing a housing boom yet. And so we were able to buy the house for $720,000. We put 40% down. So we were well within the margin that you talked about. The house went from $720,000 to a value in August of 2021, a month before the hurricane, of $1.6 million.
Wow. Wow.
I have it on the market right now for $850,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, nobody can predict the weather, although Southwest Florida is prone to hurricanes, as is all of Florida. But the one we had, Ian, was the hurricane of a century. There's never been one that strong and done that much damage, but the practical reality is previous hurricanes didn't have as much property to go after it, creating damage on both industrial, commercial, and residential property that wasn't here when the last major hurricane hit. So you you look at it and you know each area of the country has its unique situations. The Midwest has tornadoes, and a bunch hit recently in Ohio that really just leveled towns. And you have floods in the east and mudslides in the west. So there's all kinds of weather conditions that can impact the value of a piece of property. And and so understanding that it's not an investment that you're guaranteed to make money. You're guaranteed to make money because there isn't. There isn't really any investment you're guaranteed to make money other than US Treasuries. But the point is that we've been indoctrinated that when you come out and you get married, the first thing you want to do is buy a house. And probably when you can ill afford it in terms of household income, unless you get a great job. But you know, we're going through right now, looking at where are we going to, we're not going to stay where we are. And we're looking for something else for our sons who would like to buy because they want to get some tax deductions, but they also want to help mom and dad with a place to live, and so we can stay in Florida. But what's driving my sons are the two things that I just mentioned. They're interested in trying to help mom and dad who've suffered this catastrophic loss, but at the same time, they're looking for an opportunity. It may be a better time to buy real estate today than it was in the summer of 2022, just before the hurricane.
Yeah.
A lot of people have the largest percentage of their net worth tied up in their house.
Yep.
And it's that houses are not liquid. You can get loans, but you're borrowing your own. When you think about it, if you buy a house and it builds some equity, and you decide you want to do something, and you're going to want to reduce your credit card debt because mortgage rates are 3.5% and credit card debt's 29, the spread's pretty simple. But when you go to your house to get money, in reality, you're borrowing your own money. The value of the house and the home equity is based on the net intrinsic value of the house, net of fees and expenses and interest rates and taxes, and how much they'll give you. And typically in home equity, they'll only give you 75% of the net off of the mortgage. So, but you're borrowing your own money to do whatever it is you want to do. And so in rental, there's a lot of things you don't have to do that you have to do in a house. And the other factor is, what if you want to buy a house, quote, for investment property purposes that you want to try and rent and manage? Tough to make any money.
Yeah. And again, I speak to a lot of real estate attorneys, and there are ways to do the investment property where you're as buttoned up as you can be. But a lot of people, even in COVID, when people found out that they didn't have to make their rental payments, and you had these single family investors that had one home that couldn't really afford to make the mortgage on a second home and relied on renters to pay it, that's a whole nother piece. So, you know, bringing it together, right? Let's talk about the aspects of the decision making. So, like I had mentioned, and I guess the overall blanket statement with what we'll discuss today, and we probably won't cover everything, but number one, educate yourself. There are all too many people rushing, trying to just get approved, low credit score, perfect example, right? One of the things that we teach when we're working with people is when you get into a mortgage, and so we have the mortgage ready program where people can't get pre-approval. they have to go through, or they're opted to go through a HUD coaching program for 4 to 6 months. And one of the things that we teach them is, if you have a 620 credit score and you can get approved, and again, no disrespect to the mortgage industry and the business people in there, but these are commissioned employees and they want to make commission on a sale, right? So when you have a credit score, let's say of 620, and you decide that you want to get into a mortgage and you can get approval there because everything else matches up, the amount of interest that you would pay, different if you had, let's say, a 640 credit, a 660 credit score, so 40 points higher, would result in about $63,000 over the life of a loan, which is around $175 a month. So not only is it costing you more in interest, but it's costing you more on your monthly payment. So because people get desperate, the first piece of advice is and always will be, get educated. Know what it takes to be a homeowner. If you think that that's the road you want to take, one of the pros and cons of renting versus owning, when you rent, you know what your payment is. It's fixed. Maybe you pay utilities, and maybe some owners will make you pay for water and trash, but at least you know what that is, and you're not responsible for things going wrong, boilers needing to be replaced, the roof needing to be replaced, problems with the property, cesspool. I mean, all of these things that a homeowner has as a responsibility, as a renter you don't. So for people trying to get into it, if you need a place to live and you're renting for now, take that time to educate yourself on all the things it requires to be a homeowner, and how are you going to plan. Like when you own the home, know from when you go to buy it, when you get your inspection report, how many more years does the roof have? Are you going to have to replace it in 10 years? And if you do have to replace it in 10 years, what is the cost of that going to look like? And are you budgeting for it? Because you brought up a valid point about borrowing off the equity. One most important point for people to recognize as a homeowner is, you don't own the home until you have paid the last installment and there's no money owed left to the bank and your taxes. So
The
you
other
don't own
thing,
the home until you own the home.
one of the, we got about a minute on this segment, but one of the things that you brought up, I just want to expand a little bit. When you're going to borrow money, you've got to find out what the restrictive covenants are in the mortgage loan. You talked about the house. Well, if the mortgage lender may say, you live in a flood zone, you live in an area that's prone to hurricanes. You may have a 25-year house, 25-year guarantee on the roof, but a hurricane comes and tears it off in 8 years. So they're going to say that the useful life of that house roof is going to be much less than what the manufacturer said. So you might be looking in 10 to 12 years as opposed to 20 to 25 years in replacing the roof. That's it. And roof is probably the most expensive thing that you can put on and spend on a house. And
Yep.
I having just gone through that, it was $52,000 to replace, but it wasn't just replacing the roof. The underlayment was torn up. The city,
Sheetrock.
yeah, well, in the case of the roof, not only was the roofing lifted up, but the city building department changed the nailing pattern on how the sheathing is attached to the rafters. So they had to when they tore everything off, they had to go back and re-nail the roof so that it met the nail patterns under the
Oh
new
my
construction.
gosh. Are you kidding me?
No. So
That's
anyway,
incredible.
we've got to take a break. And how can people follow you, Gordon?
So you've given us the great honor to have an opportunity to have a landing page that consumers can go to. So if you want to go on the internet, it's cambridgecredit.org/D Perkins Media, or you can call 855-435-2066 to talk to a counselor.
We'll be right back with Gordon.
Hello, this is Dan Perkins, the author of Sad Eyes Book 2. In Book 1, we watch her grow up and develop into an intelligent, practical, and beautiful woman. She knows what she wants to be, and she will not let anything happen that will stop her from reaching her goal. Book 2 has many challenges she faces during World War II, People say it's hard to put down. You can get Sad Eyes Book 2 at Amazon.com or JanCarrollPublishing.com and ask at Jan Carroll for a special deal if you buy both books.
Okay. Is there anything
That's
else?
incredible to me.
What?
I know this. I don't care. I know this is not going to air what we're talking about right now before we start up again. The nail pattern,
Yeah.
unbelievable. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. That's what we were told, that we had 4 nails and we needed 6, and they needed to be spaced every so many feet, and they had to have a specific alternating pattern and then before so you got the sheeting re-nailed, then they had to the building inspector had to come out and approve the nail pattern before you could put on the tar paper and the roofing material. I mean, it's just
I can't even. I cannot even.
And what was funny is when we looked at the house, when we finally could get on the island, it looked over a 2,300 square foot roof, looked like about 13 tiles that were in individual spots that were blown off. So I figured there wasn't that much damage. But what had happened is the wind got underneath the roof on the overhang and lifted the whole roof and pulled them all out of the
Oh my
nails
God.
out of the rafters.
Jeez.
That's why it had to be re-nailed.
That's incredible. I mean, this is again, that's just way over the top nail patterns inspection. Like
Yeah, understand. Okay. So anything else specifically we should be talking about?
I think we should go into also the fact that, we're not in control of housing values, right? The change in market, the change in economy, the change in everything. Like, let's talk about the current housing market where inventory is low, and in COVID, people were paying 30, 40, 50, $80,000 over asking price because of low rates and a lot of inventory. And now that the inventory is tightened up, when you're a homeowner, you don't necessarily control the value of your home based on the market.
All right. Okay. We'll go there. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Cambridge Connection, and we're talking with Gordon Oliver, our expert on all things credit. We were talking in the first segment about buying versus renting, and we want to continue that discussion. We were talking about during the break all the things that you have to pay for when you own and the things you don't have to necessarily pay for when you rent. Question becomes, if the principal reason you're buying a house, you need a place to live, whether you rent it or you buy it, you still need a place to live. Is the tax deductibility of the interest worth it? Now, I say that because you mentioned something very important. This time in our country, more so than any other time I can find, we have a shortage of about 7 million residential units in this country. I mean, if you come down to Southwest Florida where I live, you can drive and you'll see all these new developments going up, apartment buildings, condominiums, houses. I mean, down the street where our house is in Sanibel, there's a lot that sat there for the whole time that Sanibel was never sold. It was on the market. And the last time I was there, they're pouring foundation and they're building a new house. And there's several more that I've seen on the island. People think it's the time to buy or build, but
Yep.
there is an underlying demand that has prevented houses from necessarily collapsing because there's a demand for housing. Part of that is immigration, 15 million people coming in needing housing.
Yep.
And as they move out of the shelters and start becoming members of a workforce, they're going to want the American dream and to have a house. So I don't think we're going to see a major collapse in housing prices, but there's a thing called an affordability index. And it's a function of your income versus the mortgage payment and the other expenses. It's still pretty expensive to buy a house almost anywhere in the United States, and in some places almost impossible. And people are leaving certain parts of the country, whether it's New York or California or Illinois, because housing prices are unattainable. But those people who are selling and moving are moving into places where housing may be less than what it was before, but they're using their savings that they've acquired through the sale of the house because it's gone up in value because they've been in it so long. They're buying almost what a level that they're selling. So they're not really building a tremendous amount of equity in the house. And the question is, can it continue to rise? And if so, what rate? So that the investment, there may be more risk in the investment side of property values going up, depending upon your acquisition price, than there has been in a long time, because prices are at levels we've never seen before.
Let's let's keep some things simple, right? You brought up the tax credit off the interest, right? So for the first, of a 30-year mortgage, for the first probably 10 to 12 years, you're basically paying interest.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes as a credit on your taxes. We won't get into that because I'm not a tax professional, but yes, there are credits there. But you hear strategies about if you're in a 30-year mortgage, paying it bi-weekly so that you can accelerate that down to 22 years because you're making more payments across the life of the loan than the 30-year term. But you're still, for a 30-year mortgage, let's say 280,000, you're still looking at paying about 420,000 total once you're paying the interest on the account if you don't accelerate things. So where you brought up, I hear exactly what you're saying, and this is why I always bring this back uh, to I'm half full and half empty when it comes to a lot of this. So I work between that, but the reality is that in today's market, the interest rates have gone up, the economy is not great, groceries are up, gas is up, cars cost more now. That's never coming back to reality. Um, Everything costs more now, so that it puts people in a position where if they're not making more money, you have to be very careful. And this is back to the rent versus own. You have to be very careful not to be so desperate to get into a home as a homeowner without understanding that you have to look at the values of what you can afford and have a plan, at least a 5-year plan that you're going to be able to sustain any of the maintenance or any of the things that the house is going to need. And when you put the rest of those percentages into your budget for groceries, for insurances, for utilities, energy went up, right? A whole nother piece. Energy went up also. So if everything went up for the people that bought homes 2 years ago and they're not making any more money, they got themselves into the home and then the economy changed and now everything else costs more. So this is not a fear-based position. It is just understanding, number one, there's fluctuation in everything that's not in your control, including the cost of goods in a bad economy. I hope that the economy goes in the right direction and everything comes down. But then you brought your position in about the housing. The need for housing is certainly out there, and there's a shortage of houses available because people don't want to give up the home that they have now because they just have to find another one that's overpriced at a 7% interest, not exactly doable. So now what does that mean? There's a lot of projects across the country of building housing complexes with governmental support to help to be able to put people in homes. But again, that eventually comes with uh, some residual effects that come from things like that. So it always comes back to, and I know we share, the conservative approach to things. And the only place that I come from with all of this is because we've counseled so many people over the years and we've seen the ups and downs. We saw the 2008 housing crisis. we've seen the 125% lending in mortgages fail miserably. When you're lending people 25% more than what the home is worth, it's a really, really bad idea. So all of these things come back to, let's control what we can, right? So education, key. Know every aspect it takes of being a homeowner, what your responsibility is, what taxes are, what insurances you need, both home and personal. And on the renting side, same thing. Do you need renter's insurance? Do you have things that are being stored in the property that you're renting from someone else that have a value to them that you need to protect? This is all about making sure you're financially savvy, whether it's renting with a plan to buy or renting forever because you don't think buying a home unless you could pay for it cash because of all the expenses that come with it is a good idea. So it really comes down to making sure you have a plan, making sure you educate yourself. If you're going to be a homeowner, that comes with great responsibility. And I'm not telling anybody that listens to this program not to do it, because that is the American dream, to be a homeowner, to have your own property. You just want to make sure you don't do it so that it makes you miserable because you've overextended yourself and you're not able to handle or manage it, which just causes other problems for both family relationships and even, the potential volatility of having a roof over your head.
You know, we, my wife and I have been married almost 56 years. And when we first got married, we lived in an apartment, and our dream was to own a house. And a few years after we got married, we assumed a mortgage on a house. And we assumed a VA loan at 4.75%. And and sold that and moved to another house, and then moved to New York and bought a house, and then sold that house, and then moved into a new house, and then we fell in love with Florida, so we bought a house down here, and we had a house in Florida, and then a house in New York, and on and on and on. And there is something about owning versus renting. And it had been such a long time that since we had rented. Here we are now in a place where we're renting, and it's expensive because it's a senior facility. But um, there are a lot of we got a problem. We call the maintenance people. They come and fix it. We've got cleaning ladies that come every week, and they deliver our UPS directly to our door, and so there are certain advantages that are there, but it's a cultural shock after probably 50 years of living in single family homes to go into a rental place is a cultural shock. But we're getting over it. But it is a shock that a lot of people, when you buy, it's the same kind of situation. You have a cultural shock of going the other way, moving from all the things that you didn't have to pay for in rent, now that you have to pay for that you own. And what if the checking account balance is off? Got a problem.
Right.
So, but I really have concern about if the over undersupply of housing and oversupply of people looking for housing. I
Yeah.
don't know whether that's going to continue, but if that bubble were to burst, you would probably see a lot of people's net worth adversely impacted by decline in real estate property at a time
Yeah.
when,
I mean, even in New York, there are some areas where they're working on making it almost totally legal to build a shed in your backyard, and if you can run plumbing to it, be able to make that a living facility. Like that's what's coming from your concern. Now taking a single family home and now turning it into opening up, ordinances so that you can use the property to have other people live on there. It is a concern. I don't know. That's not my expertise, and I don't know how it changes. What I do know is that at the same time as that's happened, there's been over 100,000 loan officers that have left the industry as far as mortgage banking, right? Because the market has been terrible, inventory has been low, mortgages are just not being written at the frequency that they were 3 to 5 years ago. Then you've got the realtors that just had some kind of judgment passed down where now there's some criticism on how their commission is paid. So everything seems like it's not, a great environment in housing at the moment. And I hope that that can shift because it is a direct correlation to our economy being healthy. And right now, it is one of the byproducts of the bad economy that we have right now that is a major concern.
So, do you have any of your clients in the banking sector or credit union sector or whatever are telling you what they think is going to happen to rates the rest of the year?
And I don't mean this the wrong way, but they're trained to be projecting the best. It's like they don't want to talk doom and gloom because they're in that business. So if that's the number one question they're going to get about rates, I think we talked about this. And coming from a counseling perspective, the new term in talking people into a high rate is you're just renting the rate for now. You can always refinance when rates are better down the low. And when
Right.
that's true, and while that's true, who knows when that's going to be, right? So, I don't think anybody really knows.
Well, we had the Chairman Powell of the Fed yesterday talk about that they do want to raise or lower interest rates, but they need to see better improvement in the pressures on interest rates before. And Japan just raised its rate. Believe it or not, Japan raised its interest rate from negative to positive.
Wow.
What was going on? You were borrowing money from the Chinese government or Japanese government was lending money and paying negative rates of returns to investors. So
Wow.
you were guaranteed to lose money.
Wow.
And it was for 10 years that was been that way. And there's still places around the world that are still negative interest rates.
That's incredible.
Anyway, we're out of time. We've been speaking with Gordon Oliver from the Cambridge Connection, and we had a great conversation on whether you should buy or rent. If you missed it, you can go to danperkinsmedia.org and download the show. Thank you for joining us today, sir. And again, how can people reach you?
Yes, cambridgecredit.org/D Perkins Media is the website, or you can call 855-435-2066. Dan, I'm buckled in, grateful to be on the show, looking forward to future topics that we can do to help people with financial wellness in very troubling times.
Yep. Thank you. We'll be right back. Okay.
Thanks for listening to the show today. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to send a comment, please do so by sending it to Dan at danperkinsmedia.org. That's Dan at danperkinsmedia.org. And thanks for listening.